Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome once again to the Bismillah podcast by Adult Advisory. I'm your host, AbdulAkeem Akinbode. Today's conversation, we are going to be looking at some of the gap that most people don't like to talk about. Consider this. At the end of 2024, the Islamic finance global asset has grown up to 5.98 trillion USD. And this is growing at 21% year on year. Now, when we look at from today, looking back at 50 years ago, when the first Islamic commercial bank was established, that was in 1975. To this day, we are seeing the growth continuing to be advancing and projecting forward. And by 2028, we are expecting a growth of market around 7.5 trillion USD. Now, that is very interesting. But here's the most uncomfortable truth that most people don't like to talk about. And that is the advisor's dilemma. The challenges along the line of delivering Islamic finance services to the last mile. And these are part of the challenges that most advisor or advising firms they face in the process of delivering the so-called Islamic finance services. And when we look at the reality now, when we are seeing the growth and the opening of new frontier markets, like in Kenya, like in Ghana, like in Pakistan, and even the Central Asia, where we are seeing new markets unfolding. And this market also have their peculiar problem, which in its way, you may want to ask, is it a Sharia problem? Very far from that. These are problems that are wrapped in so-called headings such as tax codes, lack of talent, lack of standardization, and in some cases, political will. We are going to be discussing this, and we are going to be navigating from the lens of an advisor, not just any advisor. We are talking about an advisor that has seen it from the global spectrum, from private and even the government organization. With me today discussing this is none other than Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Eskandar Shah Muhammad Rashid, the Chief Executive Officer of ISRA Associates. He is a former consultant to the World Bank and also a former advisor to Brunei Belief Project, And not only that, is that he's also a member of the commission that is talking about the Malaysia Competition Commission, where he has been able to see from the private, the public, and even from the regulatory standpoint. Join me, let's have this conversation, and let's try to explore why are the challenges, what are the nature, and how has he been able to navigate them through his experiences. Thank you very much, Dr. Eskandar, for joining this session.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes,
it's a great pleasure to have you join us. So humble to sit here like this with you today. It's a great honor.
Yeah, I mean the honor is mine.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm honored to be here as well.
Alhamdulillah.
And to be part of the program.
Alhamdulillah. I think the last time we sat this close was when we concluded the beefs in 2025, heading to the airport to catch another flight for another conference in Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly, yes.
I think we had a very interesting conversation, maybe the first of its kind, touching on different aspects. And part of those conversation gave insight to why we are having this larger and broader talk today. Trying to look at your current role, because you are a man of several hats. Even though many people cannot see, we can see, and I believe a large number of the audience also must have contacted or have one contact with you, either from the classroom perspective, from the advisory role, or in conferences as well. So let's try to narrow it down to, first, your current seat as the CEO of ISRA Associates. One will want to, in a way, probe that, looking at the fact that as an advisor, you are given a task of ideation to implementation. They consult you with ideas, you help them put it together and give them a roadmap of how to implement it. In the course of implementing all of this, where do you think lies the problem that eventually will tell somebody, a client, that it seems there's a roadblock or we may not be able to proceed with this, from your experience, sir?
No, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And you are probably too kind of giving all these compliments. I'm really honored for it.
Alhamdulillah.
This idea of advisory and consultancy, I mean, what exactly that we are trying to do? We are actually trying to build the architecture of Islamic finance ecosystem. So we are trying to play a small part of it. So by providing technical assistance, by providing advisory, by providing pronouncement that the process is actually Sharia compliant. By providing executive educations, ensuring that the talents really understand what exactly they're doing. So the responsibility of being an advisory firm, especially in the domain of Islamic finance, is not just ensuring that the firms are able to do what they want to do, but at the same time be the custodians of the principles of Islamic finance, which is a lot more harder as compared to be another consulting firm. All right. Because we are trying to achieve what we call as a dual objective. The first objective is basically to ensure that the principle of Sharia is not being violated. And second, at the same time, allow innovation to take place so that the firms can grow and achieve what you said, a greater market share for Islamic finance. So coming back to your questions of like, okay, how do you draw a line? I mean, obviously the process is a lot more complicated than saying yes or no. But the general principle is that, we trying to accommodate in such a way that we allow and enable innovations. Right? We don't want to become the reason why innovation doesn't take place in Islamic finance. But at the same time, there's always a principle that cannot be violated. So when you reach that point, then obviously, you have no other options other than saying no to your clients. Sometimes people say just because you are being paid, you have to say yes to your clients. But a lot of people don't understand that, we at ISRA Associates, we're actually part of a larger entity, which is INSEF University. And we also, INSEF University was established by Central Bank of Malaysia.
So when we look at the explanation you gave and the peculiar problem that we faced when trying to advise different organizations, people will argue that some of these problems are related to tax issues and which at the end of the day cannot be resolved and you have to stop along the line. Some will say they are related to talent and some may argue that they are part of standardization issue based on different regions with different peculiarities. What flies in Malaysia may not fly in Saudi Arabia and the likes. From your own perspective, what has been the most common roadblock, especially even when Sharia is ready to fly? What are the common issues?
I think it's a great question. I mean, first we need to understand that this is work in progress. Okay, nobody knows what gonna be the full spectrum of Islamic finance, right? So, and different levels, different countries are facing different level of developments. Some people are developing the banking, some wants to go start with sukuk first, some wants to look at Islamic finance only because of social finance, because they want to develop the zakat and wakaf. So, I mean, some people might say, oh, this is very complicated. But for us, the way that we see it is that, different problems require different sets of solutions. Right? And it makes the whole thing more complex, and also, but at the same time, it's exciting. Exciting in the sense that because you are always be part of something new. For example, we are now currently working in Uzbekistan. It's a new market, so there are different challenges there. So, but at the same time, it's kind of exciting to be part of a journey to transform the financial institution, or at least make Islamic finance has a greater space in the new country. So coming back to your questions of like what would be the biggest challenge? I think would be the will of wanting Islamic finance. I think it's not about Sharia is complicated, doing something new is complicated. I mean, all these things are human problems and it can be solved by humans. And it's not a rocket science because we have done it in many parts of the world, like Malaysia, and some countries are more advanced than the others. So as long people have the will and understand the value proposition of Islamic finance, I guess the rest become easy. I just give you an example. Okay, let's say taxation is a problem. Because in Islamic finance, sometimes you have double taxations because you have contract that require selling and buying. So if there is a will, you can come up with a law that says that when it comes to Islamic finance, tax exemptions can be given. At least you are only charged once, just to make sure that you are at the same par, that you are at par with the conventional finance. Right? So all these are actually human problems that can be solved by the will of humans. Okay. And sometimes people say, technology and everything. But I guess today we are living in the world of abundance of technology. Okay, so technology is no longer an issue. It's just a matter of how well that you want to use the technology. So I would probably say it's the political will. So political will can be one side, but on the other side, the demand. So if people really want Islamic finance, then the supplier, in this case the government or the financial institution, got no choice other than to offer Islamic finance. Because it's not only we are talking about the right value proposition, but at the same time we are also saying that it can be profitable too. No one is saying that you need to sacrifice your profit just because you do Islamic finance. Right? So that would be my argument, in the sense that the ecosystem has matured, not to the level of conventional finance, but we are getting there. We have a lot more experience. We know the do's and the don'ts. We know what is working and what is not working. Although it's not a perfect, as I say, it's always a work in progress. But I guess we are getting there, and we just need support from more Muslim countries to do Islamic finance.
We need support from more Muslim countries. And now when we look at the countries now trying to create an exponential of it, when we look at the private versus the government, many a time you advise the banks, but now you're advising governments, ministries. Those are the ones you are speaking to now, and this speaks to their own peculiar problem as well, where you could be at times the combination of trying to choose between commercialization and compliance. Now, how have you been able to, or have you at any time at governmental level, because you are moving, just like you mentioned about Uzbekistan. Before Uzbekistan, you were also somewhere in Africa as well. So when we look at all of these lessons learned from this diverse market, when faced with challenge of choosing between commercialization and compliance, and the government, now in the case of government, how will you be able to walk through on those eggshell?
You see, there are two ways of looking at these problems, or I would say to answer your questions. You see, compliance is a process. Eventually we will get it right. Because it's something that we learn from the mistakes. And all this non-Sharia compliance and deliberation, all these resolutions will eventually make our so-called human power to comply become better and better. Right? So I don't think that compliance is a big issue. It's a dynamic process, but it's something that I would say within our control. But a lot of people think being compliant is sufficient to do Islamic finance, But I would say it's a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. So when we speak to the government, we don't go and tell them that, listen, you need to do all these processes, you need to establish the governance framework, come up with the right people, and so on and so forth. So we don't start with, you like Islamic finance, you need to do 10 things, but that's not how you convince people. You convince people by telling how Islamic finance actually have transformed the nation building process. Take Nigeria for example, right? Sukuk has been very successful in Nigeria.
Yes.
You know, in fact, if you drive in Nigeria, their highways and everything, they will like put a billboard and says that, you know, this project is actually funded
by Sukuk 4, Sukuk 6, 7, like that.
So it really shows that, you know, we are not talking about Islamic finance just because, you know, it's halal, but we are talking about Islamic finance because it's transformed things. You know, because there is a governance, there is a compliance, there is a accountability, there is a need to make impact. So people can see, because, you know, any government, I must say any right government always want to develop the countries, you know, always want to make the life better for its people, right? So we show progress. You know, for example, in the context of Malaysia, for example. So if people ask me, okay, what if Islamic finance asset is about 50%? I say, you know, is it significant to be at 50%? I say yes, because now we are as good as conventional. So now our bargaining power in terms of policy decisions and everything as important as the conventional side. Right? So if I'm in Islamic and I'm sitting in the front or, you know, opposite of a conventional guy, I have equal footing. So I have the right to demand whatever that the conventional is demanding as well. So now with the same power, then we said, okay, let's now compete on who's having a better value propositions. So for example, when it comes to Islamic banking, I can say that, okay, when Islamic banking, you know, you don't like, you cap on penalty, right? And you have a product that, for example, you don't compound on interest, or you don't compound on late payment, for example, right? And then you said, okay, you only invest in, you know, companies that really show positive impact to the society. You know, you don't invest, let's say, in sin companies, all right? So the question is that, is this better for the society? So the debate is no longer who's bigger and who's smaller. The debate between Islamic and conventional is more of who exactly has a greater value proposition, right? And impact and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying that we should really compete with conventional. I'm just saying that let us run in parallel and see, you know, who's actually doing better and who has a better story to tell to customers. And our customers, with the right awareness and also education, and they will figure out, you know, maybe I should do Islamic. Not just because it's Islamic, because I feel that they actually wants to do the right thing. Of course, this notion that, you know, Islamic finance is just similar as conventional, you know, they are just changing the names and contracts, eventually it's the same. You know, I mean, we can continue talking about this, but rather than look at the form itself, I think it's also important that we understand, in principle, what we are trying to achieve with Islamic finance is substantially different as compared to what the conventional finance is trying to achieve, at least at the principal level.
At least at the principal level. But again, I want to draw you back to some of your memories. I mean, when we take a step back around 2017 up until 2021, you were in Brunei, working on the Brunei Belief project. That is a jurisdiction not so big compared to some other market where you were building from ground up structures and the likes. Looking at the current day and other new entrants like Ghana, like Pakistan, where we would say some other places where conventional has tried for several years, they're just trying to come up with. From your experience, for those new markets trying to advance, what will you say will be the best way to go forward in terms of setting their foot out? What should they build first before building other things? Because putting into perspective, many people will come to Malaysia to shop on different structures, different know-how and experts, and flipping in a, if you call it maybe copy-paste or mirror effect. How do you think this can advance their markets, and what are the challenges that this may pose to them while trying to adopt the copy-paste for new markets?
You see, I was an advisor to Belief for 4 years, and I mean, it gave me a great opportunity to work with the young and emerging countries, you know, and small countries. So whenever you want to start something new, you must always understand what is the best way that you can contribute to Islamic finance. Right? So for example, in Brunei, what is their aspirations, right? So they want to make sure that the country has the ability to compete, with their peers, in the region, and also to develop the competency. All right.
Yeah.
So once you have clarity in terms of your objective, then it's quite easy for us to provide, for example, directions. The mistakes that many countries do is that whenever they want to do Islamic finance, they suddenly want to have the whole spectrum of Islamic finance. Oh, this is amazing. We want to do everything. Okay, that's the fundamental problem. All right. So I always feel that, for example, don't and this rhetoric that if you do Islamic, conventional have to die, is also not a good thing as well. Why is that the case? Because we are dealing with financial sector and it's very fragile. So you want things to have organic growth, in everything, in terms of talent, in terms of technology, in terms of people, in terms of the regulation and everything. So you must allow the demand side and the supply side to grow, in harmony, right? Because once you put a stress, sometimes things is just like, okay, this is not working out. People will just given up on it, right? So we always say that, okay, start small, start with the right purpose. And for example, in Nigeria, although you only have 2 or 3 Islamic banks,
I think we have 5 now.
5 now.
Yeah.
Okay. Although relatively small relative to your
population of 240 million.
Yeah. But you choose like, okay, infrastructure development is the key.
Yeah.
All right. And you went big on Sukuk.
Okay.
All right. So this is an example where you know your purpose, you have a clarity, you know which sector to really push on, and make a success story out of it. And then the spillover of that success story will eventually be felt by other sectors. Then the demand will become organic. Right. So instead of like, okay, and I guess that's what we always advise other countries as well. So choose your low-hanging fruits, the part that you can showcase the proof of concept, and then you start spreading into other fields.
So rather than copy-pasting what the likes of Malaysia, which took them about 4 decades to achieve, and a new market with ambition and very ambitious, just flipping in all of those for a market,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
For example, you take Singapore, they established an Islamic bank, but it didn't work, because they just have difficulty, finding a presence. But then they decided, okay, if the full spectrum of Islamic banking doesn't work, what is the niche area that they're going to specialize? So they focus on Islamic wealth management, leveraging on their reputation of the financial hub. They focus on the Muslim sector, more on the social side. They focus more on developing the wakaf and also the zakat side, which to develop the community. So this idea that you need to have everything at one time is not necessarily the right idea.
It's not.
All right. But once you have a success stories, then you can tell people, okay, we start with wealth management. We start with it. Now Singapore now having more presence of Islamic banking, started their own takaful products, and more presence. So I guess being smart and shrewd in terms of your approach makes a lot of difference in terms of developing Islamic finance in the new country.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Now, I'm trying to look at you from your lecturing perspective, because, when you walked in, the first thing that I saw before seeing the other thing was the way you'd always be in the class, walking around the students, always interacting. And this is not seen from today. It's been a while, lecturing starting from Malaysia, then pivoting into the Middle East, in Doha, lecturing and building also the academic there. I just want to ask, not comparatively, but in a way trying to have a retrospection on how the Islamic finance educational sector here in Malaysia and your experience back in Doha, what do you think is the missing link? What are the things that are done well, and what are the things that are still missing in the Islamic finance educational industry?
You see, Islamic finance is a very complicated field. The reason I say the word complicated because it's trying to integrate many fields together. You know, law, Sharia, legal, Sharia, finance, economics. And then you need to not only understand Islamic economics, but you need to also have a strong fundamental of economics as well. So you cannot simply say, oh, I just want to study Islamic economics without going through a rigor in terms of micro and macro. Right? So the same logic applies, and because of that, to be an expert in Islamic finance is really hard, because it takes more years. Like, you need to learn many things to appreciate both sides, you know. Because if you just study Islamic without strong fundamentals, then you may not be able to really understand, you know, the larger context or the bigger context of the knowledge, right? So because knowledge for me is a knowledge. There's no such thing as Islamic economics is halal and conventional economics is not halal. You know, because knowledge is knowledge. How you use the knowledge is a different thing. For example, in finance, we have time value of money. So if you use interest as a discounting, then it's not right. But if you use a profit rate for discounting, then the principle applies. So you can say the same thing as well for other field as well. So what I would say missing is that people have failed to understand how rigor Islamic finance should be to produce what we call as a solid talents. So because we have these challenges, A, maybe time constraints, B, people who have studied conventional, then they study Islamic, so they are adding up the knowledge. You know, some people study Islamic Sharia, find it difficulty understanding conventional. So I guess the short answer for your question is that finding the best curriculum for Islamic finance, I would say until today, remains a big challenge. And it's becoming more and more difficult because things are dynamic and evolving over the years. Now people got to learn digitalization, people have to learn AI, people have to, you know, get exposure on, you know, CBDC and tokenization. So because the world is growing so fast, so how do you keep without progress? So my answer to that is that as long people have a strong fundamentals, learning becomes easier. Right? So instead of teaching everything to our students, so I think we need to go back and really focus on to build a solid foundation in the important domain in Islamic economics and finance. Let people learn according to their specializations. And learning should be continuous. You know, not everything should be learned in the classroom. And learning should be liberalized in the sense that you can learn wherever you want, however you want, whatever you want, in the best way that fits you. So I think the curriculum have to change. Not everything should be done within the university. Some done at the university level, and some should be pursued at much more at the, you know, maybe using, you know, Coursera or whatever ways of learning. So that's my answer to your questions.
Interesting. Doctor, if I am, for example, a listener right now watching this podcast, one thing that will come to my mind is, this is the CEO of ISRA Associates, and is an employer of labor. If you would want to advise me, for example, who is perhaps, I want to take a job at I'm not taking a job. I want to take a job at ISRA, for example. What is the skill that you have seen missing from new graduates when it comes to you reviewing applications, CVs, and even beyond the CV, after you've done the recruitment, what are the skills that you see missing? Maybe one or two, which our listener can benefit from by improving on that.
You see, when it comes to being a consultant, right, there are two things that really matters. One is your technical competency, you know.
Technical.
Okay. So that one it's very hard for us to judge like whether somebody has a strong technical competency or not. Normally we look at the experience, what you have done, what are the projects that you have performed, what are the projects that you have completed, and we make assumptions that okay, you have certain level of technical competency. Okay, but what is really important that beyond technical competency is actually how, let me sum it up in using the word, how you carry yourself. Right? I think sometimes people use the word, there must be a certain classiness when it comes to being a consultant. So when I say classiness means that how you carry yourself, how you communicate, how you manage a project, how you actually decipher a problem, because sometimes problem is complex. So if you look at it in totality, you may not be able to solve it. But if you able to break down the problems, let's say, okay, this problem I break down to 5 layers, and this one I approach this way, this one I approach this way, this one I approach this way. So those are important skills. Okay? Because you are dealing with clients, and clients want surety that they confidence. They want to know that they are dealing with somebody who is actually capable and able to guide you in the right way. So that is the challenge, and it's not easy for us to find the right talent. But the process will continue. Alhamdulillah, we have a good team. And we hoping that we will be able to become a global player when it comes to consultancy, especially in the field of Islamic finance.
So thank you, Doctor, on that. I want us to look a bit into some of your vast experience, especially looking at your consulting for the World Bank, and looking at most of these when it boils down to how Islamic finance as well is beginning to open up in new markets. Recently, you were in Azerbaijan, organized by the ISDB. We see new markets opening up. We see Ghana just last month. They released the first Islamic bank, which was licensed, and other markets too in the Central Asia, for example. These markets that are opening up, they are also faced with potential challenges. Some of them are underestimated, but from your perspective, dealing with different markets with different combinations. When I say combination, I mean markets that are minority Muslim in nature, or markets that are stark conventional finance in nature. These are new frontiers. So the challenges that they face, most of the time underestimating some of the major problems which they may feel may be navigated within short period of time. What will you say is the most stumbling block when it comes to new markets and the peculiar issues that they face, and how to address them?
I think when you are dealing with a new market, I think I mentioned this thing briefly before, that you need to understand the prioritization and sequencing. Okay. So that's why whenever we are dealing with a new market, roadmap is very important.
Roadmap.
All right. So when you talk about roadmap is just it's not like you just coming out with a pathway, but more importantly, you do gap assessment, you do diagnostic, you analyze the strength and the weakness, and then you said, okay, this is what we are trying to achieve. The objective, the intent, is to achieve A, B, and C. But because we all have so-called limited resources, we have limitation, we have what we call as like you use the word roadblocks, challenges. So you need to understand that how you want to, create a pathway towards achieving your objective. So that's why it's very important that you deal with the problems with some experts, and generally, I'm not trying to promote ourselves, but this is where we come in and say, okay, let's do a diagnostic assessment, let's understand the challenges, let's gather feedbacks from the stakeholders, and understand what can be done and what cannot be done, and then create a roadmap so that the implementation of it follow a certain sequencing. Right? So sequencing matters because you financial system is an industry where it's very fragile, in the sense that if you make one mistakes, when you lose your confidence, for example, you establish an Islamic bank and then suddenly the Islamic bank fail. So people will have that in memory that, you see, we will never put our money in Islamic banks. Okay, but how do you build that confidence, trust? So this is important. So the regulator, when they give licensing, they must make sure that the bank have a viability to operate in the new environment, like for example following the Sharia rules, compliance, and so on and so forth. So it looks very simple on the surface that we just go on and establish something, but as a matter of fact, I think it's just more complex. But the short answer to your question is that do a proper gap assessment, understand the objective, do a roadmap, do prioritization, and eventually do sequencing, and then you can see that things will actually grow organically, inshallah.
Things will grow organically. And again, when we look at this jurisdiction, still looking at new markets, for example, standardization is one of those key things that you touch on briefly. And looking at one of your work on compliance and standardization, on compliance and Sharia governance, and also market discipline, one of your research work, looking at how standardization play a key role in helping to navigate new market. Would see that in some cases, some countries recognizes IOFI while they still have to battle with their own local Sharia boards. From your experience, in what role do those regulation, standardization in the area of Sharia, for example, what role do they play in helping to really move on, especially in regions where perhaps maybe they don't have a prototype that they are following in navigating such orders?
You see, people are emphasizing too much on standardization and harmonizations. People feel that once you have one rule that fits all, things gonna become a lot easier because you can communicate to each other. Everybody will speak the same language. People will understand. Okay, I use this law, you use this law, then we can actually operate. I mean, I'm not denying that, but we should not be really looking at too much of standardization and harmonizations as well. So there must be a certain principle that we can agree on. And then we look at our own differences as a matter of strength, because it fits some local context. But of course, when it comes to the international context, there must be a standard rules that everyone operates, So, and for that, we have IFSB, just like equivalent to Basel. So the question is that whether people use IFSB, how extensive it is, So everyone is just keeping an excuse, or this AOFI and IFRS and everything. But anyone have studied that what exactly, how far that they actually differ from each other? Actually the differences is not in what we call as so material, in a such a way that if I use AOFI and you use IFRS and we are not able to deal with each other, there are certain treatment of the Islamic contracts that have been treated differently in AOFI and compared to IFRS, but it doesn't mean that we cannot do business together. Alright, so I feel that this idea of harmonization and standardization eventually will happen gradually when the market gets larger and larger. Alright, so we should not be using this as an excuse to say that we can't do this because we are just not the same. And I strongly believe that you need to give them time to evolve, because different market is actually at a different stage of maturity. Okay, so that's, for me, I feel that we need to allow people to learn, to make mistakes, to adapt and to innovate, and eventually give time for the industry to grow. Okay, Malaysia took more than 40 years to understand what is the best way to do Islamic finance, and yet it's not a perfect ecosystem yet. We still got a long way to improve where we are right now. So if you're expecting a country that only implement Islamic finance 5 to 10 years to get it right from the beginning, I think it's going to be a tall ask. Okay, so we should give people space to grow and make mistakes and eventually get it right over time. Yeah,
over time. That is very interesting. And looking at part of your journey on advising, the dilemma that revolves around it. Has there been any time, maybe when you were advising private or governments or even ministries or at the global level, where you had to say, we cannot move on this, where you said no to a specific project because of its contradiction, or it has always been an easy swim through?
no, we are always clear about what we can do and what we cannot do, but it doesn't mean that, everything is outright no at the beginning. We try to understand what can be done, what is the first options and what is the second option. So if the first option is not viable, then we propose the second options.
Yeah.
If the client doesn't like the second options, then we can't help it, because we are the custodians of Sharia. Because we cannot compromise Sharia in the sense that people start questioning the integrity of our pronouncements. So if you just say yes to everything, then why you need us? Anybody can come and simply say, if someone is saying yes to everything, then means we can do whatever we want. So as I said at the beginning, there are certain lines that we will never cross. Okay. But at the same time, we do not want to become the obstacle for innovation. So we always trying to find a way to support and to facilitate. But there will be a point where you just cannot compromise anymore, because it's a clear violation of the Sharia principles. So that point, we need to draw a line and say, this cannot be done.
Yeah.
Or if you want to continue doing this, then you need to basically create a different set of entity. Like this entity to do this and this entity to do this. And our Sharia pronouncement only applicable to this entity. Because this entity is clearly not following the Sharia principles.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are very clear on that. So yeah.
So if you are going to give a 3-step roadmap or 3-step playbook to maybe an upcoming market, for example, in setting out into the Islamic finance world of adoption or service delivery, what would be the 3-step you would want to give to somebody listening to this today?
I think first you must understand the market. The demand side must be very clear. You cannot make assumptions that the demand is there just because they are Muslims. It doesn't work that way. You need to clearly understand the demand side, because supply side, as long there is a viability in terms of selling the product, supply side automatically will happen. Any banks will be interested to do Islamic banking window or Islamic banking subsidiary because there is a demand side. You need to understand your market, number one. Number two, you need to very clear about the regulations. So regulation is always the starting point. So you need to make sure that the law allow you to operate in the way that Islamic bank or Islamic finance can operate. I think that is very important. So understanding the limitation of your regulations and where to tweak your regulations is very critical. And number three, people ask me, this will never happen if there's no human elements. So you need a strong champion to make sure that Islamic finance can be successful. So we are lucky in Malaysia, people who come before us, many of them are passionate about Islamic finance. So you need a champions, because without champions, people will give up very quickly. But the champions who are passionate, who believe in this idea of Islamic finance, who are willing to make investment, like in the case of Malaysia, Central Bank willing to establish a university to make an investment, allow the ecosystem to grow. Okay, and so we were quite lucky in that sense. So we need more champions in other parts of the world. So people who are passionate about Islamic finance must step up and simply say, okay, this is what we want to do to free our system from ribawi, to allow Islamic Muslims to actually operate in halal financial sector. Because it's mandatory for them to operate for example, in the halal way, but we should not just be doing it because it's halal, we need it, but we also believe that this halal is actually good for the society and we can make a difference using our own way of doing a financial system. Okay, that I would probably say the 3 steps. So
looking at today and projecting into another 20 years, also putting side by side the prospect that you are currently handling right now, and the momentum that you are seeing from different regions that are coming up, and those that are already in the pipeline that will be setting out to the market maybe in another 5 years, where do you see Islamic advisory services going, and how, to what extent are they able to really drive Islamic financial service to the last mile?
Things are more challenging now at Islamic financial services because of the evolvement of the market. So we need to create a multi-layer of advisory. For the new entry, the second is for the middle entry, and the other one for the advanced entry.
Advanced market.
Because everyone require different form of advisory. So the way I see it is that in 20 years time, because we have learned so much about the past, so we can create what we call as a super intelligence agents, who have accumulation of all this knowledge in terms of understanding what need to be done at the entry level, at the middle level, and also at the advanced level. So I think people should be willing to share knowledge. Because when I talk about super intelligence, it can only happen when we bring all this information, all this experience in one place, so that we know the ABC of doing Islamic finance. So that there is a clear playbook of how things actually being done in the different market. So if the market is like this, these are the things that you should do. Okay, but of course eventually we need human elements to process this recommendation by so-called the super intelligence agent, right? So we want to make things more like fluid and simple and dynamic in such a way that people have the knowledge in front of them, and they just need to know how to use the knowledge and implement the right policies.
The right knowledge, implementing the right policies. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Iskandar Shah Mohammed Rashid, the CEO of ISRA Associate. Thank you very much. And that has been the bottom line. And when we are looking at the dilemma that is faced by the advisory institutions, the bottom line still remains that the fact that it is a Muslim majority country does not indicate that the market is there. It is about the readiness of the consumer. Are they aware of the product? Are they interested in the product? Is it driving values? And do you have the right regulation support from the government? And all of these are very key to driving that service to the last mile. And most of the time, as mentioned by Doctor, the issue of standardization is not merely a conversation of just harmonizing. It is a conversation that might be necessary, not just for today, but looking into the future, we can still work with what we have today. And again, as a 3-step to any new market entrant, it is important for you to understand that, is there a market for you? Do you have a regulation? And do you have the right champions to drive it to the last mile? That has been the Bismillah podcast today by Adel Advisory. I'm your host once again, AbdulAkeem Akinbode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.